Hey guys, I'm here with Andy Schectman, and I'm going to get his thoughts on the Great Reset. I've been covering it quite a bit. I've been hearing him talk about it, and we were kind of on the same page about. It seems like a conspiracy theory. The first time you hear it, it's like, okay, it's another something or other. But before we get into it, Joe Biden has talked about the New World Order. He's talked about food shortages are coming. The Fed chair just said we're going to have more than one reserve currency. And these things are really starting to add up to, they're nowhere near a conspiracy theory. We are about to enter the Thunderdome. And how we're preparing for the Great Reset is with precious metals. You know, there's a few ways to protect your wealth, fine art, farmland, precious metals. So how is precious metals going to act in that kind of environment? Because, we're going somewhere we've never been, and all we can really do is speculate. How do you see us trading precious metals with digital dollars?
Well, everyone talks about silver and the utility it offers and the value that it offers, and I agree, there's great value, maybe the value proposition of a generation. But I look at the reclassification of gold by the Bank of International Settlements as Tier 1 reserve as maybe the single biggest moment of my career, at least up until that point, where it certainly underscored the repatriation of metal by the banks and the acquisition by the central banks of metal leading up to and through the reclassification. I think it really needs to be said again, gold is the only other Tier 1 reserve next to US dollars and treasuries in the world. And why would they have chosen that? This is step number one. Why would they have chosen gold as a Tier 1 reserve asset? Why have the central banks been buying so much of it? Why did all the central banks repatriate their gold from the New York Fed and the Bank of England? Almost as if they've been redistributing the gold to the central banks, who are all, I think, were all cued in on the reclassification because they started accumulating and repatriating it over 2 years before the BIS reclassified it. That's number one. When you look at, and like you, I thought it was, that's just crap. There's no Great Reset when it first came out in 2020, when you were hearing Klaus Schwab say this, when he was talking about
what we need is a Great Reset.
Exactly.
It's Dr.
Yes.
Evil.
Well, and so I didn't think anything of it, but then, when you see the second biggest event, maybe of my career, maybe my lifetime, was the Russian government signing a contract for joint military cooperation with Saudi Arabia, and this was done in September, the next day with Nigeria. This is enormous. This is huge, because what has given the dollar its world reserve status for the last 50 years is the protection of the Saudi kingdom, where oil has been sold globally for dollars. It's given a synthetic demand to the dollar where every country needs it to buy energy. And so you have massive demand for the dollar globally because of our protection of the Saudi kingdom. You have a nuclear armed military who is saying, we'll protect you, Saudi Arabia. The day after they did this, they came out and said, we have ICBMs that are hypersonic on all of our nuclear-powered submarines right now, and the State Department came out and said, we're concerned. And so things have been speeding up. But just the other day, we see Nigeria come out and sign an agreement with China to sell their oil in dollars. In yuan. And then the next day we see that China is in negotiations with Saudi Arabia to sell their oil to China and be paid in yuan. Now, what people are missing with the yuan payment is that the yuan bond that they use to pay, a yuan-denominated bond, is convertible to gold immediately on the Shanghai Gold Exchange. And so you have these countries that, even if they don't want to stockpile yuan in their treasuries, they're able to immediately convert it into gold, which is Tier 1. And you're seeing what's happening in Russia, accepting now their oil for either rubles or gold, and they even said Bitcoin just the other day in terms of the unfriendly nations. But what does all of this mean? What does it mean? It means that we have, because of the fact that in the last 2 years, 80%, 80% of every dollar ever created in the history of the United States was done in the last 2 years. And so, courtesy of the Fed and all this crazy money printing, you have assets that have been levitated to the highest level ever, and stocks, bonds, and real estate at all-time highs, right? And yet, the massive amount of money creation, arguably, will only devalue the dollar more through inflation.
Let's go back a little bit. When we weaponize the dollar by taking Russia off the
Yes.
SWIFT system, is that going to further the debt? That's going to make everything faster, correct? I mean, that's
yeah, because you look at Biden's $5 trillion budget proposal, so you have a government addicted to spending, and at the same time you just lopped off 10% of all of the oil production in the world. That's always settled in dollars will now be settling somewhere else. They're the second.
That's backed by gold.
Yeah, and they're the second largest producer of oil in the world. The largest producer of natural gas in the world will no longer be settled in U.S. dollars. So you have less demand and more being printed, the value falls. But if this happens, if Saudi Arabia came out and said, we're now selling oil to China, and there are billions of people, and we're going to accept yuan, overnight, like that, the dollar crashes because half the world who's had to own dollars to buy oil will choose other currencies in their neighborhood, or maybe their own. Maybe they open up to all the currencies. Maybe they just want gold. Whatever it is, you will have a cascade of dollars coming home. And when that happens, interest rates will spike. When interest rates spike, the three pillars of wealth, stocks, bonds, and real estate, all at all-time highs, all arguably valued in a very irrational way where price discovery is impossible, collapse. And what also collapses? The U.S. dollar collapses. The U.S. dollar, because it's being dumped globally and has been inflated away over the last few years, collapses. Stocks, bonds, real estate, dollars simultaneously all collapse. And when you think about it that way, where the pieces are being put in place to dismantle the dollar as the singular world reserve currency, when the Fed chairman says, well, there's room for a second world reserve currency, and when the biggest powers, China and Russia, nuclear powers, are now really protecting and trading outside the dollar for energy, protecting these countries and trading outside the dollar for energy, it really is the beginning of the end. And let's not forget one last piece that we've talked about before, and that's the Belt Road Initiative in China. They are connecting 75% of human population using the new digital yuan. And what you are witnessing is a de-dollarization by the rest of the world. You know, when we look at the West, we have the U.S., Canada, and parts of Western Europe, and we got about 1 billion people there. You got 7 billion people elsewhere that are now being, I think, awoken to, like you said, the weaponizing of the dollar is forcing people to reevaluate the situation, and I think it's happening in a quicker fashion.
So when, you know, that chicken's coming home to roost, all the dollars all over the earth, when it comes back, because nobody wants dollars and we've got to take it because it's our currency, you know, that's a big chicken. That's like a 40-pound chicken coming home to roost. That's probably when they switch the script to digital.
Absolutely.
That's how they're going to try to hide it.
Absolutely.
I would think.
And they'll be blamed on the Chinese or the Russians or something, and not the just total gross mismanagement of the world reserve currency and the hubris of a government who thinks they can pick and choose who holds the world reserve currency. It is not for us to choose. If you have the privilege of creating the world reserve currency, we're already sanctioning, I don't know, a dozen countries right now. You are giving people incentive globally to de-dollarize and find a safer solution. And when those dollars come home and create an inflationary cascade at the worst possible time, when we already have real inflation right now close to 15%, forget about the CPI 8% lie, it's more like 15 or 20%.
Closer to 20.
So you have a tidal wave of dollars. There's way more dollars outside the U.S. than there are in the U.S., and all that money comes home. Interest rates spike, the dollar collapses, and as interest rates spike, it kneecaps the three big markets, stocks, bonds, and real estate. And when you think of it that way, it's like it's plausible. Yeah, there's your reset. Bang, everything collapses. Yeah. Everyone is impoverished at the same time. Fed comes in, issues a new digital dollar, and the question is, do they peg it to gold as well and use the distributed ledger to denote the veracity of the gold being held? Does that mean they have to actually audit Fort Knox for the first time since 1956? Or do the BRICS nations and the Chinese and Russians, who are massive accumulators of gold, the largest producers of it, India, Brazil, Russia, China, India, South Africa, all of these countries, do they beat them to the punch and issue a gold-backed digital yuan or a BRICS nation currency? Part of me feels that it's going to be a race to who wants to challenge the U.S. dollar for that second world reserve currency that Fed Chairman Powell said is imminent.
Right. Well, I know we've got dinner to go to and a lot of things to do, so I'm going to let you go and get off the air. But in the next, one more thing I want to talk to you about in the next video is the SDR. It's a basket of currency and how it correlates with gold and silver and other countries that hold it. But we'll do that in the next one.
Real quick, and I just want to mention one point to that. To me, what really got me thinking about gold, I mentioned at the onset of this interview about gold being reclassified Tier 1. From a logical perspective, why not choose the SDR as the Tier 1 reserve, where you have a basket of other currencies, right? Instead, they chose gold. And to me, that says something. That says that gold will be part of a backing of a new standard after the Great Reset. When they blow everything up, the end of the Keynesian experiment, the only way you get dummies to buy into the system again would be if it were pegged. And I say dummies tongue in cheek, because if it's not backed and pegged to something like gold, then you have, even if it's digital, it's just another fiat currency, and governments will do what they've always done. They will choose inflation over austerity, and they will continue to inflate and continue to distort
and
the
lie
yes.
and tell us they have things they can do. They can't do anything. They're out of tricks. All they can do, they've already done. And we're kind of on the downhill side.
We'll talk SDRs next time, but I think it's a really important thing to think about. Why did they not choose SDRs Tier 1? Why did they pick gold, the only other Tier 1 outside the U.S. dollar? And it's been that way for almost 80 years. So to me, that's a really interesting point, and look forward to talking to you about that next time.
Absolutely. Well, I'll put the link in the description below if you want to hedge your wealth with gold and silver. And, the people that are waking up to this every day are new buyers. That's why silver is getting so hard to find. It's getting more and more as we go. Y'all have an awesome day. Thanks, Andy, for coming on with me, brother.
Good to be here.
Later.